Okay, can everybody see that? All right, I'm going to assume so. All right, so today we are going to be talking about while loops. This is a very important part of programming, just looping in general. So you probably are going to be using loops quite often. And the loop has a basic structure. So the first thing that your loop is going to do is it's going to check a condition. If that condition returns true, then it's going to run the code block following the loop. And then once that code block is completed, it's going to check the condition again. If that condition is still true, it's going to run that code block again. And as long as that condition's returning true, it's just going to continually run that code block. Once the condition equates to false, then the code block is no longer going to run. So that's just how a general loop structure is going to work. Don't worry if that's a little bit overwhelming right now. We're going to go over this in a lot more detail going forward. There are three common types of loops. So there's the for loop, and that's generally going to be used when you know how many times you want that loop to run, so a specific number of times. So say you wanted a loop to run 50 times. A for loop would be ideal for that. Or you wanted it to run for once every time for a letter in a string or for every item in an array, a for loop is going to be ideal. A while loop you're going to use whenever the code block will be run an unspecified number of times. A do while loop is very, very similar to the while loop, but it's guaranteed to run at least one time, even if the condition that you're checking equates to false. And one thing to kind of know here is that a lot of times, especially with the for and the while loop, they are often interchangeable, but it is kind of good to know from the outset, like which one you would maybe want to use for which situation. Today, we're going to mainly be focusing on the while and the do while loops. So there is kind of one little caveat that we want to start off with here. If you're ever playing around in the console with loops, an infinite loop will crash your browser. So we'll go over how to avoid that. But basically what an infinite loop is if you set up a condition that's always going to return true, it's never going to return false, then that infinite loop is going to be, it's just going to keep going and keep going and keep going. And obviously your computer can't handle that. So it's going to stop. And if you want to just look here, this is a general example of what a while loop looks like. We're going to go through this step by step, but you just want to take a second, look it over, kind of get a feel for how it works. All right. Okay, so the first thing that you're going to do when you're setting up a while loop is initializing your variable. So that's where this variable I equals 1. I is just a kind of the convention that you're going to see used quite often in while loops and for loops. So if you're just going to be incrementing a single number, then it's very common to use the I. Okay. And then here, this isn't necessarily something that you're going to do in all of your while loops, but in this example, we're just setting up an output variable that you're just saying, let's count. So as we go, we're going to add the numbers that we're counting to that. And then we've got our, the important part, our while loop, and then this I is less than 5. That's where our condition is going to be. So what we're, this is, we want this to equate to a Boolean, kind of like what we were working on yesterday with our conditionals. We always want this condition to equate to true or false. And then here, what we're doing is we're concatenating. So basically, we are saying whatever I's value currently is, we want to then add that to our output. So at this point right now, it should look like let's count 1, because that's what the current value of I is. And then next what we're going to do is increment our counter by 1. So our I value is going to be increased by 1. And then that's, so far, is our basic structure for our loop. And then here at the very bottom, we're going to console log out our output. It's important to note here that it looks like maybe this would be console log each time that the loop runs. But as we're going to see, this line here is not actually going to run until the while loop has completed. And by completed, I mean till it's gotten through to a point in which that condition was false. So we'll be able to see that in a little bit more detail. Okay. So this is just kind of reviewing it a little bit over here. It's kind of walking you through it, kind of similar to what we did, the computer logic. So you're creating your output variable string here. Okay. Move this. I don't think I can. And then you're running your while loop. Condition is true. Well, I is less than 5, so we know at this point it was 1. And then we're incrementing our counter by 1 again. And then it's going to print once the while loop has finished. So let's go ahead and actually take this and put it in the console and see what it looks like. Okay. Okay, so let's go ahead and just run this just for a quick example. So as you can see here, it's at the bottom. Let's count 1, 2, 3, 4. So every time that I is less than 5, it's going to increment that 1, 2, 3, 4. We're adding it to our output. We're concatenating it. And then once the while loop has finished, meaning that this I less than 5, so once it hits, so once at this point, basically what's happening is when I equals 5, it's no longer less than 5. So the while loop is going to equate to false. And then our output is going to be console logged down here. Does anyone have any questions about kind of how this works right here? Okay, perfect. And then here you can see just a really simple change that if we had said, well, I is less than or equal to 5, which if we could go over and do it in the console, but it's pretty straightforward that the let's count would actually go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's pretty straightforward, but just a tiny little change. And so this is the basic structure we've gone over a few times, but whenever you're thinking about it, this probably be a good slide to maybe come back to, that you just run your while loop here, you check your condition, and then inside of it, you're going to have the code block that you want to run. Now we're going to dive into what exactly an infinite loop is and how it's going to crash the browser. So here in this example, we set up a variable x equals 5. Then we set up our while loop with our condition, and we want it to run every time that x is less than 10. And then we're going to console log what x is. And then after we've console logged what x is, we're going to decrement x, so subtract from it. So every time that this loop runs, it's going to go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, -1, -2. So x is always going to be less than 10, and the computer is just going to keep subtracting, keep subtracting. There's never a point at which x is going to be greater than 10. So this is what they call an infinite loop, and this is what would crash your browser. So you want to be careful about it. You probably do it a few times. It's okay. It's part of the learning experience. So these are like examples of conditions that are always going to evaluate to true that you kind of want to avoid. So 5 is less than 10. That's always going to be true. 4 is less than 10. Always going to be true. -100 less than 10. If you put those in there, that loop is just going to always keep running because it's always true. Any questions about infinite loops? Okay, so there is one way that you can stop a loop outside of the while condition, and it's called a break. So it's a keyword that terminates the loop and tells the interpreter to go on to the next code statement outside of the loop. And like I said, this is something that you might want to use if you're trying to stop an infinite loop from occurring. And so we'll go ahead and just plug this into the console and see how it works. So here we set up our variable again. So it starts off at 0. And then here we've done something that we probably wouldn't want to do in actual coding. We've said while it's true, which means it's always going to keep running. It's always going to keep running. And then we say if the count is equal to 10, then we want to break. And then we'll console log here. Let's fix this. So here we're just going to console log, this is the number, and it'll console log what our current number is. And then we're going to increment our number by 1. So if you think about this, if we did not have this line here from line 3 to 5, this would be an example of an infinite loop. So even though we're increasing what our count is here on line 8, the condition here on line 2 is always going to be true. So it's always going to be increasing every time that that loop runs, and there's never a point at which it's going to stop. But because we've put this here on line 3 and 5, if the count equals 10, it's going to break. So we'll be able to see what that looks like when we run it. So here we can see this is the number 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So once it equaled 10, it hit that break keyword, and then it never got to line 7 or line 8. Any questions about how the break works? Just as a little note, you generally don't want to use the break to stop your loop from running. That's just an example of how the break keyword is going to work. Generally, what you want to do is set up your conditions in such a way that they are always going to end. And then this is a little bit more advanced. This is a do while loop, which we kind of went over a little bit earlier, but now we're going to see in action. So with the do while loop, it's always going to run at least one time, even if the condition that you put into the while loop is false. So it's a little bit of a different structure. The code block does not come after the while keyword. It actually comes after the do keyword. And what code you put in there, that's what's going to run. And then the while, for where the while loop would be, instead you just end it and then you put the condition in, and we'll show you how that looks. So we'll just set up a easy do while loop. So we're going to console log. We'll just give a number there. And then wow, no, what's fine. And then let's set up our number variable. Set it to 0. So here what we've done, we've just set up a really basic do while loop structure. We've set up what our number is going to be. We're going to console log it, and then we're going to increment it. If we set this to true, then this would just keep running infinitely, as we've gone over before. But since we set it to false, if we were doing a normal while loop, this would stop running right away because that condition is going to equate to false, so it's going to stop instantly. With the do loop, we're going to see that it's going to run at least one time. So if we run this in the console, we can see that that did in fact run. We can change this here, so you can run it just like you would a normal loop while the number is less than 5. And we run that, and it works just like our while loop would. So this is something that you want to use if you want to make sure that the do loop is going to run at least one time. Not a very common situation. You're often going to just use the while loop, but it is something that you have in your toolkit that you might want to take advantage of from time to time. Okay. And this is just another example here. Very similar. So yeah, we don't need to dive into that too much. And that looks like the end of the slides. Do you guys have any questions about while loops or do while loops at this point, or anything that you'd like to add, Sam?
I don't have anything to add to while loops. I do have a few things I want to say before we break off into pairs. So I'll give, does anybody have any questions before I jump into that?
Yeah, I actually do have a question. Could you redefine exactly what do loop is? I always get confused between do and while.
Yeah, so the do while loop is kind of a modified while loop. So the while loop is going to run just like we'd set it up before, but the do loop is going to run at least one time. So say, let's maybe try to think of a different example here. So
what if you just put false inside of the conditional there? So right now, lines 3 and 4 will run at least once, and then they won't run again.
Yeah, so if we set this up in a while loop, just a normal while loop here, and we said console log, hi Sean, and then we try to run this, it's not going to run. See, it ran up here, it console logged this at least one time because this do loop ran once, but if we put the condition false here, when we try to console log it, it doesn't actually happen.
So my understanding is for do loops, you put the condition after the brackets, like you put the code block and then comes the condition, and no matter what the condition is, it runs at least once.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
Right.
So the code block is here, and then the condition goes in the same place that it would in a while loop. It's just that there's nothing after it.
All right. All right, thank you. I think I got it now.
Any other questions? That was a good one.
I have one. How often do we use while loop as opposed to like for loops in production, software?
I mean, Zan and I maybe have differences here. I generally use for loops, but there are definitely situations where you want to use the while loop. With a for loop, just as maybe a little bit outside the scope of this, with a for loop, the variable is always going to increment by the same amount. So, the for loop, you say, variable I equals 1, and then you increment it by 1 or you increment it by 2, and you just keep doing that. Whereas the while loop allows you to do things a little bit more different, a little bit more complexity. So you could say, if I equals 2, then you want to increment it by 3. Or if I equals 3, then I want to increment it by 5. You have a little bit more flexibility and a little bit more finesse as you're approaching it. You don't generally need that. So most of the time I'm just using a for loop.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and actually you can do different things inside of the body of the for loop. So you could, instead of let's see, I'll type in the chat for people that haven't ever seen a for loop. It's a different type of looping structure that we will get to. Let's see. Oh, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I'll just do it here.
I typed exactly the same thing in chat. Yeah, so the first part of this for loop declares a variable, and then the middle part is the condition that has to equate to true for it to run. And right now we're incrementing I by 1 each time at the end of the for loop, but you can actually, you could increment it by 5 there. And so each time it would add 5 to I, and you can have any JavaScript expression that's going to return a true or false value where we have I is less than 10. So you can have different types of conditions. So the for loop is fairly flexible. That said, I have heard that while loops are slightly faster in a lot of cases. I don't think they're fast enough that it makes enough of a difference that people only use while loops in production or anything like that. So yeah, I think it just depends on how you like to write code. It's a stylistic choice.
Yeah, but there are definitely instances where it maybe makes a little more sense to use the while loop, or maybe if you want to use like a do while loop. To the best of my knowledge, there isn't something in the for loop that you can really do to replicate that without getting unnecessarily crafty.
Yeah, that's true.
Good question. Any other questions?
So if you run that one that you just did, do you have to throw like console.log and then like I in it in order to run it, or no?
Yeah, I mean, it would run. It wouldn't do anything right now. But yeah, we'll just put it here.
And then it would just show 5 if you just throw the I in there, right? Or no?
Yep, exactly. Right. So it's never.
Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly. So it's really similar. We'll get to the for loop quite a bit more later on, but for those that are curious or have maybe dabbled with it a little bit, that's what it looks like.
Cool. Alrighty. So now we're going to break off into pairs. I do want to get a feeling for how people are feeling about Fluebits and if they think they might be able to set up the workspace on their own. So I guess in the chat, can you give B's if you feel like I somewhat understand Fluebits and I think I can figure it out on my own, and then a P if you're like I'm completely lost and I could use another demo. All right, let's see. So why don't I forget who KY Industries is, and Sean also needs a recap. All right. I'll tell you what, since it's 2 people, I'm actually going to let us go and start working in pairs, and Jordan and I can come to y'all's groups, and we can help you set up the Fluebits workspace. So wait, who is KY Industries?
That's me. That's Kyle Mansk.
Okay, cool. Thanks. All right. Yeah, so without further ado, good luck on the exercises.